Well, now we are here, why don't you tune up 1980 and we can, well, leave?
I can't.
Oh, why can't you?
Because if Sutek isn't stopped, he'll destroy the world.
But he didn't, did he? I mean, we know the world didn't end in 1911.
Do we?
Yes, of course we do.
All right. If we leave now, let's see what the world will look like in 1980.
I say, this is like something by that novelist chap, Mr. Wells.
Your dungeon master has placed you in a dreadfully precarious position.
You're playing the most
1987.
game ever created.
Your skin grows cold from your first glimpse of the enormous beast.
It's a product of your imagination.
Survival depends on a quick, decisive move.
Your choices are limited.
Stand and fight, or run.
Use your lightning bolt.
Victory is yours.
It's a trick!
That's the world as Sutek would leave it.
Hello and welcome to my cellar. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving. I tape these on, tape myself. I record these on Thursday night, Friday morning. So I almost fell asleep. Too much turkey and dressing. So it'll get to you on time. One of the most interesting revolutionary RPG and systems I encountered early on was Symbolist Chivalry and Sorcery. It was an attempt I felt to ground an RPG setting in a more realistic world, so all the players were somebody in society, with the attendant advantages and disadvantages. And one of the concepts was that everyone reported to somebody higher up on the totem pole. Everyone, except perhaps the king, had a master. That's something I like to maintain in my games, particularly for lower-level characters. They're all working for some individual or group that serves to both provide training and a little protection, but also confiscate some of the proceeds of an adventure as a tax. Of course, back in the 70s, early 80s, the adventurers were, as you say, basically murder hobos for hire, meeting up in the tavern, hearing rumors of lost temples in the jungle or some such thing. Perhaps being hired by someone to perform a mission, but generally acting as independent operators. It gets more interesting, I think, if the players at least start out as some power broker's entourage with allies and rivals in a political environment. Okay, that's the way you like to run it, that's fine. I don't. I wouldn't. The reason Chivalry and Sorcery didn't do better than it did was that very system of everybody reports to somebody else. And it has been my experience that the majority of fantasy role players don't want to report to anybody. That becomes a problem. Resentments grow. Backstabbing. Plotting. Who needs that? Do enough of that in the campaign by yourself. You don't need the players doing it. But that's just my opinion. If you like all that stuff, that's fine. If your players like it, that's good. But that general principle of reporting to somebody else just did not sit well. Now, taxing them when they come back from an accessible adventure or something, okay, I could see working that into the tapestry. But I've not found yet anybody likes to report to anybody else necessarily. The reason I love D&D so much is that there's enough procedure to step in when resolution is fuzzy or the DM wants to press their thumb on the scale non-judiciously to create an outcome in spite of player choice. Yet there are so many fruitful voids in the rules as written that insane chicanery can take the reins. Yes, it can. You're right. It might. That's always going to be the case in an open-ended game, such as a role-playing game. Or I've even seen some miniatures campaigns that went on for many, many, many years, and went both directions. So much chicanery was tried that the rules ended up being about a 500-page single sides, but typed out 500-page rules. So there's bad ways you can go in that way too. I remember it was one time my group were exploring a forest hill hex and they came upon a circular break in the tree line centered around an ancient tower. It was a harpy's nest, and the way they circumvented the challenge was to get their hirelings to tie ropes around the trees, and the magic user to cast magic mouth to emit a loud noise of particularly truculent a giant. The hirelings then started to marionette the trees along with a magic mouth spell to give the harpies flying overhead the impression of a large creature moving toward them. I rolled a modified morale check, and they all abandoned their lair long enough for the PCs to plunder the lair for treasure, not spilling a single drop of blood. Well, if you guys are doing this and you're having fun and you as a DM are willing to allow this, okay. Personally, sounds like you got way too many hirelings to justify them. It seems to me that if you've got a lot of hirelings, you must expect to return a lot of loot every time you go out, which sounds to me like it might be leaning a little towards Monty Hall. That's my take. Marionetting the trees? Oh, come on. You allowed that? How many did they have? How strong were they that they're able to make full-size trees shake? I know it's fantasy, but come on. Really? I ran the same group through the zero-level funnel in the DCC core rulebook, and the way they circumvented the fire statue trap was for one of the zero-level characters to stuff his starting trade good, a pound of clay, through the flue of the finger that conveyed the fire itself. Since I ruled the trigger was, if anyone trying to move to the east or west exits, there was certainly ample ash and scorch marks near those doors. They were able to determine that they would be safe if they interacted with other objects in the room. Okay, now that's good play when they start asking about where's the scorching and those types of things to give away information. That's good play on the part of the player characters to ask to obtain that type of information. If they obtain a workaround through clever collection of information, great, good on you, players. I'll see if I can't do better giving you a better puzzle to tease out next time. But that's good. I just can't imagine a world where gold is plentiful. Even if you had the world's biggest mine nearby, that gold would either be raided by some nearby empire, or if the home empire is strong enough, at least it would be traded to far-off lands for valuable products in other lands. I agree that any PCs that landed treasure, it would be dangerous for them. The king or Shire Reeve might want half or 90%, and you can choose one piece of loot. Thieves would want it all. I like Pfeffer and the Mouser always being broke, despite any treasure they previously landed. People who live that long on the edge lifestyle also play hard too. Wine and women can take it quickly. Yeah, I always like. Pfeffer and the Mouser, I believe, had an oversized effect on Gary in terms of all the books that he absorbed that went in. I think Pfeffer and the Mouser had a bigger percentage in the recipe. And I think, we'll talk about the Mouser and his mischief in a later question here. I think of the rogue or thief as a scout, spy, too. So Bilbo or 007. They can pick locks and sneak around, but for this type, it is not probably for personal gain. Real thieves are just out for personal gain. I even have some trouble with the concept of a thieves' guild. It's just hard to imagine it existing despite any love for the Grey Mouser. It's also hard to imagine a cleric, paladin, or even a medieval knight tolerating such a person in their party. Well, that last is a good comment. That's a good point. Goody two-shoes types would not care to have them there. The thief is a rogue, just a guy that knows a lot of interesting skills. And you just don't really want to ask where he got them from. Okay, so I like that concept. As for a thieves' guild, actually, thieves. If you look at thieves as criminals, a band of criminals, they're no different than any other kind of criminals that I've ever seen, especially the ones that are smaller actors and forming syndicates. What's organized crime today? If not gangs, read syndicates. The mafia, read the syndicate. If a newly coined thief was seeking his fortune in the city of Whack-a-Mole, and there was an existing hierarchy of thieves and burglars in Whack-a-Mole, then he would definitely have to clear it, pay his dues, remain a member in good standing. If you can, go look up in the old dragons the Phineas Fingers, and then go find the old adventure gamings. I'm sure they're online too somewhere. Because Phineas, the whole premise of the first part of the Phineas adventure was the Thieves Guild, and the hobbits, the halflings as they had to be called, had the corner on it, and didn't take kindly to Finn and coming in and working in their territory. Now, it was done from a comic standpoint, but it paralleled enough of reality. With the issue of a cleric not wanting to be a cleric anymore, I see it in a similar way. My clerics are based on religious orders of the Roman Catholic Church. If they're released from their vows in an amicable fashion, then they become a fighter of an equal level. If for some reason they are fallen, then they must change to an evil alignment and may choose cleric, but must follow the evil god of my world. There are only two in my world. It's fairly easy to lose clerichood in my game due to the strict guidelines of the good religious orders. Confession, penance, tithing, etc. are all very important parts of being a cleric in my game. That's cool. I can certainly understand that. There should be a hierarchy. God knows that every church tried to steal adherents from the other churches and thought that his was the best and the better organized and yada, 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 yada. On PC knowledge of alignment, many players I have talked to over the last year have said they don't use alignment, citing role-playing limitations as a reason. Good point. I found this interesting, but am prompted by last show's final question on the Thief class to ask, how obvious is alignment to PCs? Is hiding one's alignment or not adhering to it difficult for other PCs to detect? In fact, is PC alignment hard to determine from PC to PC in general without chicanery or incontinent adherence? I have always felt that the player character should be completely free to decide what of their personal credo they're willing to share. Alignment is different in that there's, the old alignment was lawful. You do the same things in the same manner. A lawful monster being anything that isn't a PC. But you could expect them to react in pretty predictable, standard ways. Chaotic, you never knew what they were going to do. The original elves, as meant to be played, were chaotic. You just didn't know what they were going to do. They're capricious. They're mischievous. Not necessarily bad, dyed black to the core, but certainly mischievous and prone to chicanery. Now, good and evil, that's a whole different thing, and that's going to be kind of visible in your demeanor, in your apparel, in your behavior. Good and evil is just that, good and evil. Are you a good person? Are you a backstabber or a double dealer? Now, I've known people that tried to start a campaign where everybody almost everybody was evil. And I've not known a single one to last any appreciable length of time because they just ran amok being evil against each other. I learned a lesson a long time ago when I used to run more elaborate pre-gens in the games that I ran at cons. I took alignment entirely off the Thieves because it gave the people that picked them carte blanche to steal from each other, and I thought, no, they won't be aligned at all, and we'll see. And that worked better with people that ended up playing them. Now, I haven't used them in quite some time, but it worked then. So no, I don't think you'd want to. I don't think you'd want to be real forthcoming. Certainly not when meeting up with a group or becoming a new member of the group until you'd gone through a few trials and tests together. And the newbie learns as much about the old established players as the established players learn about the newbie. I believe that alignment is much more important between the player character and the DM than it is between the player characters and each other. It's kind of a given that a adventuring party, the heart of the campaign, are all going to be pretty much closely aligned. If the group is primarily good or neutral, evil characters are going to get shanked, or they're going to be told to retire that player character and roll up something new. That's been my experience. Okay, in much earlier show, I asked you about the original impetus for including the alignment. I believe your answer was chiefly for the purposes of role-playing, help the players taking on personalities that weren't necessarily their own for the duration of the play. The inclusion of Appendix N in the early D&D books was also to guide what D&D was getting at, and was necessary for an audience that had yet to fully embrace fantasy fiction. However, why have alignments now? Let me amend a statement I just made a few seconds ago. Alignments count between, in the case of clerics, they have to stay right with their deity, who channels all their abilities to them. It's very important to them. But why have alignments now? Clerics, if clerics have to have them, then everybody else ought to sort of, because, and I don't consider this a thumb on the scales, but I do consider when it comes time to make a roll about something, the player character's past behavior can certainly influence what they need to succeed at something. It's hard to explain, but I think you get my drift. If they've been keeping their nose clean, and it comes down to either or type of role, well, they're in good in their alignment. They're following their alignment. So whether or not a fighter professes a deity, if they're following their alignments, their tenets of their alignments, then I'm going to give them a better chance, perhaps, to do something. Boy, I got something in my eye and it's all swollen up. Is it still important? It certainly is for clerics. It certainly is if you were in my campaigns, and my campaigns generally tend to be neutral or slightly leaning toward good, and you were at least neutral or maybe even slightly towards good, well, I'm going to give you a better chance of a positive outcome than I am somebody who's not. Okay, now here we're going off gaming altogether. All right. Forgive me if I'm pegging you wrong, but I believe that your career as an editor, publisher, journalist, game author gives you a vast array of print media experience, enabling you to have great insight into this question. What, in your opinion, has been the effect of the internet on both the careers listed and the state of journalism today? Well, if you compare it to what it was when I started my career, I don't think it's been good for my career for the same reasons that it's been good for everybody else. It's bad for my career, for the jobs that I did in my career, because any idiot out there can sit on his typewriter and share drivel through the various social media platforms much more easily than, say, 40 years ago people were doing with fanzines. An idiotic statement flashes around the world in moments now. Look at Musk. In that regard, the print media is dying. There aren't lots and lots of newspapers nowadays. The newspaper that I'm forced to read here in Cincinnati, if I want to read a newspaper, is a Gannett publication, which means it's pretty insipid. Used to be that Cincinnati had two strong independent newspapers when I moved here, and such is not the case. Look on your newsstand for the magazines that used to be there that aren't anymore, because there's no advertising sales to support the printing of the magazines, because the advertisers can go online and get much more effective exposure. So in that regard, it's been particularly difficult on my roles as a publisher and editor. To the games industry, well, it's kind of a mixed bag, I think. It's made it easier to steal ideas, steal game design facets. It's made it easier to try stuff on a wider array of people to get more feedback on something you're working on. Mixed blessing. AI is going to kill it all. So it won't matter. In another 10 years, AI will have taken over everything. People won't even write. They'll just go, oh, write me a memo saying how sorry I am for blah, 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 blah. And that'll be it. And then this glorious... Of course, if AI doesn't get much better at writing than it does at drawing, well, it'll be a little longer. I believe journalism is at a crossroads. When any idiot can put any garbage online and have it believed, just look at the last election cycle, well then yes, truth and honesty in journalism are pretty much disregarded. My views on the thief class is similar to yours. In my very first AD&D campaign, a PC thief stole from the group, aggravating another player. It was funny the first time it happened because we were all tweens, but it quickly became a nuisance. I've known DMs to ban halflings in their games to prevent that guy from playing a halfling thief whose sole purpose was to steal from the group. What is your take on why the thief class was added to the game? I read a few origin stories here and there, but I'm interested in hearing your viewpoint. Were you for it, against it, ambivalent? Well, I had nothing to do. I wasn't part of TSR when the thief got brought into the lore of the game. I've often wondered why exactly. I know why in the design sense, because of the influence of Fafhrd the Mouser. The Mouse and Kugel the Clever. That's why they're in the game. However, to play a thief as Kugel the Clever or the Mouser is apparently beyond the means and capabilities of a vast majority of people who play thieves. Just my take. Why was it added? Well, somebody thought, hey, who's if we're going to have all these traps and tricks and tricky locks and that, we need a specialist. Originally, the thief was an NPC, and you went out and hired one to go on adventures with you, so he was there to take the needle in the thumb, not one of you. In regard to the thief, what would your thoughts be if a player approached you before a game and said, I want to play a thief-type character? Think Subutai from Conan the Barbarian, but don't really like the class with its percentage skills and whatnot. Can I play a high-dex fighter who forgoes wearing armor? In return, what do you say is fair for things like disarming, locks, and traps and hiding? As a DM, I would probably grant bonuses to dex checks since they're giving up a key fighter feature of being armor. Really, when you get right down to it, it's entirely up to the DM what type of character you're going to allow in your game. And if you want to do something like that, okay. Subutai is an interesting example. He's pretty decent with a blade. He's tricky, he's smart, and he's pretty stealthy. But, by the same token, he's not really stealthy, and he's not really good with a weapon, so you're giving up a lot to gain only a little. But that would be just my take on it if somebody came to me. Our group was recently coming into possession of a rod of rulership. which is an interesting, if not super powerful item. As a result, we've spent several minutes trying to debate exactly how this item works, and our DM has not made a determination on how it actually functions. I've only come across a few threads online talking about how it's basically overpowered and should never be given out. Do you have any advice on how this item should be used, or if a rod of rulership was ever given out in any of the games you were involved with? No, no game I've ever played or been involved with ever had one. I believe it may have surfaced at one time in one of the Lake Geneva games in Greyhawk. I believe I heard talk of that. And it was quickly, Gary realized quickly that, oops, I shouldn't have done that. Any high-level, powerful magic using can be a campaign breaker if the DM doesn't keep sharp control over it and eyes on it. In my opinion, I can't think right offhand of a situation where I would even have that available for the players to find. Now, if they're going to go kill some minor level demon or devil who happens to possess one, but as a DM, what would I do? I wouldn't allow it in the game for very long. And if it started to be abused, then the Chromatic Council, which is the overarching magical authority in my world, would take note of it, and half a dozen members would show up on somebody's doorstep and convince them of the folly of continued use and just take it out. Great fun to win it, some fun wielding it. Now it's taken away. Oh well, go find a new toy. It flashed into my head while reading your post that one way of dealing with it is, this is a response to this one, would be to be a divine right or else primogenitor, or another way it's only seen certain beings can activate the rod. Another could be that the rod is a bit like the One Ring from Lord of the Rings and it corrupts the bearer. Yeah, you can do any of those things, and you have ample precedent to defend it. All right, getting toward the end here. Ooh, good thing. I've been talking a long time. How do you feel about box sets, and what other starter incentives would you like to highlight? Or indeed, would you champion as good ways to get folks to try D&D or tabletop RPGs? Well, that's kind of two things there. I don't think a box set... I don't think that any more than 1 in 1,000 box sets ever got sold to someone who was going to go, and now I'm going to learn. Now, well, maybe that is a bit harsh. I guess I could see D&D players buying box sets to see if they wanted to switch to another game. Anyway, I don't think a box set is what's going to put you over the top with your game. I think the best way, best incentive to get people interested is to run games, run demo games. Go to your library, your branch of your library. They have meeting rooms that they want to see people to use. That's what the library's there for. And so, run intro games. I've got 2 going at my branch after the first of the year. One's going to be run by one of the female librarians, and she's going to try to get girls interested to it. I'm going to run one for anybody that wants to play. And we'll try to get some more people interested and get a group going on its own. It'll take a bit, but you've heard some of the wonderful reports I've been sent about high school groups and how they're still playing and having a good time, and okay, that seed's been planted. Best way to get folks to try is to say, come on, let's play. I'll help you through it. Box sets are great for selling Kickstarters. Can't beat them there. Okay. Now the elephant in the room. The stuff that's been bandied back and forth about Gary's supposed mannerisms and belief system and a lot of other crap that really has no... Anyway, Elon Musk is living proof that you can be just off the charts IQ and still be dumber than a piece of day-old donkey shit. You have to take into account that D&D was written 50 years ago. Now, at my tender age of 76, when I was in high school reading literature that was 50, 100 years old, we were taught about context, understanding it through the lens of the author's time period. So D&D was written 50 years ago when a whole lot of public opinion was very, very different. So I've read that Gary was a misogynist. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Sexist? Yes. So was 65% of his peers, because he was raised that way. In fact, he was almost raised a generation back further than he normally would have been because of his family situation. And he believed, because at the time there were no females who were anywhere near as fast or strong as any men, not even the Russian women weightlifters none of them could lift as much as the Russian weightlifters, for instance. And you have to use them as an example because of, steroids versus steroids. But anyway, I published a letter or an article, I believe it was in a Dragon, or it might have been it might have been one of the last two. Strategic reviews about how if you're going to roll up a female character, you rolled up modified stats. Given society at the time, wasn't really questioned. Women were not in the military back then. They might have been in one of the auxiliaries, a WAC or a WAVE, or WAF. And Gary and so many other of his generation were sexist. Now, the odd part worth studying is the fact that during that same period of time, Gary's contemporary and Gary's contemporaries on the other side of the sexual divide, the women, accepted that. So they weren't feeling demeaned. That was the way things were. Now, okay, Gary was not a misogynist, not in any way, shape, or form. Certainly not ever while I knew him, which was a considerable length of time. Sexist? Yes. Only in the core beliefs that every man of his age, raised in his generation, held. Now, the worst thing that's come up is accusations that he was a racist. And this I must most vehemently deny in regard to my experiences. I never once heard Gary utter a racist word, let alone utter a racist belief. And since this started, I've been pouring back through my addled brain, and the only thing I could come up with that had anything whatsoever to do with being racist, it was one of the little book supplements. There was some wording in there that could have been construed. And I said to him, this passage here, what if somebody thinks you mean, oh, change it? Absolutely did a hard 180 away from anything that would have been construed as racist. All this nonsense about Hispanic people being orcs and somebody else being blacks, or maybe it's blacks that are supposed to be the bullshit. Bullshit. The basis, the impetus for those came straight out of European and occasionally North American folklore and mythology and fairy tales. Somebody else wrote something sometime, and that was what they meant. That's their problem. I don't believe Dave or Gary ever meant. Now, I didn't know Dave nearly as well, but he just didn't strike me as being racist. Now, again, I had a much more limited contact, but he didn't strike me that way. Gary certainly not. Gary avoided sounding like a racist. And that was only because some words could have been transposed, or, it was something totally accidental. No, that's not what I meant. Which is why you have editors. Because the editor goes, that's what you, no, yeah, and then you clear it up. So, I don't know what Musk's hard-on is for Hasbro or WotC or D&D. It's a product of 50 years ago society. And 50 years from now, when it's being studied extensively, if we have universities in 50 years, when it's being studied there, it will be seen as just that, a product of its time. It has really evolved. I don't think that would have been happening in anywhere near the extent it does today if it had set out to be racist or misogynistic. I just don't. And so that's my 2 cents. Hope you had a lot of turkey and a good time. Dodata Govi. Hello, and welcome to my cellar.
The curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. ESR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree.
High as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.
Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.